You're watching Summer Game Fest. I'm Tamoor Hussain, and I am excited to be joined by Fleur Marty, executive producer on Gotham Knights, as well as Geoff Ellenor, game director on Gotham Knights. And we are going to be talking about Gotham Knights. How are you folks doing?
Awesome.
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing great. You know, I'm better now that I've seen Nightwing. I've seen Nightwing's cheeks, let's call them, because everyone knows those are the best part of Nightwing.
Popular subject.
Yeah, very, very popular subject. We saw a bit of the game during the Keeleys the other day, and it's given us one of the most memorable moments from the show so far, which is Jeff Keighley shouting Batman is dead with an enthusiasm that I'm sure would upset quite a few members of the Bat family. How was it like to see that? Because when it happened, where he was like, Batman is dead, I was like, wow, I don't know, you should be dancing on his grave, Jeff.
Batman is dead.
How did you like take that moment?
We've come to terms with our grief over the development cycle.
Yeah. And also, I mean, it's great to see other people shouting it on the rooftops because, I mean, people still don't believe us, but really, he's dead.
I mean, this is I'll never believe you until I see the credits on the game. Like, if
I think people still think you're going to play through level 3 and surprise, you're Batman.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the moment where, like, I don't know, Nightwing like removes the mask and it's been Bruce the entire time. He's like Mission Impossibling it. But yeah, you guys introduced or showed off more of Nightwing during the actual gameplay video. Nightwing, obviously a character that has a long and storied history in DC and Batman particularly. What is this version of Nightwing that we're going to be playing? Where is he at in his life, and what are kind of the main concerns for him in this version of the game?
Well, so where he is in his life is a bit. It's a complicated moment for him because he's just back. He's just back in Gotham because Bruce is dead, and actually he had a big fight with him right before leaving for Bloodhaven. So he comes back and he's grieving and is also like trying to find his place. But at the same time, you know, Nightwing, he's the goofy, like, I make jokes and all that, to not have to deal with any of that. And he needs to, at the very same time, process his own grief, but also like work with the rest of the Batman family. So it's a bit complicated for him.
In terms of actual gameplay, we've obviously had some experience playing as Nightwing and playing alongside Nightwing before. Can you tell us a little bit about what this version of Nightwing is like? Is it going to be familiar to previous iterations that we've seen in the Arkhamverse, which I know it's kind of like separate and that kind of stuff, but obviously there is a touchstone there. How does he play and what does he bring to the dynamic in Gotham Knights?
I would say compared to other superhero games with similar types of combat, Nightwing is maybe one of the more familiar because of his long reach. His specialty is switching between targets. He's a very aerial hero out of the ones we have, and a lot of his moves focus on that, get back up into the air and deal lots of damage. So there's aspects of familiarity there, but also all of the moves that we've brought to the fight for him are pretty unique to the game, and also our quickfire patterns with the wrist arts. I don't think players have had that much flexibility in how they target and with what before. So it'll be familiar-ish to onboard, but also quite new.
Is it tricky to have characters that have such diverse styles operating in the same kind of space? Because you have a character like Nightwing, and obviously he's got a background as a gymnast and a performer, and you obviously want to represent that in his fighting style. But then you have, I don't know, like Red Hood, who's not that. Like, how do you kind of create, is it difficult to create a kind of like cohesion between them? How do you approach that when you know that one player is probably going to be flying all over the place and the other one's probably just going to be like moving around, gunning people down and that kind of stuff?
What we found is that if people play together, cohesion happens in the same way as if you were two people trying to get into an elevator. Like you both have very powerful verbs at your disposal regarding, regardless of who you're playing. So whether you're playing Red Hood or Batgirl, your verbs are very different, familiar, but different than what Nightwing does. And as a result, you kind of develop a different rhythm when you play with somebody who's using that hero, because of the way they move around the arena, and also how you choose targets and how you choose to cooperate with them as well.
Interesting. In terms of like narrative, Fleur, obviously you have one of the big things that is exciting people is the Court of Owls and that element being included in Knights. And obviously Dick was at one point being kind of trained, or they had their eyes on him to be one of the Talon. Does that factor into the Nightwing? Is that history there for the Nightwing, or he has a deep connection with the Court of Owls before, I guess, William Cobb became the Talon. How much does that play into your version of the story? So,
as we've always said, like, our story is really, yes, it is taking inspiration from a variety of the comics, but it's really original. So it's you will find some threads of other things, but it's not directly linked to any of it. Just like when we're talking about how Batgirl got injured, it's not exactly in the same way as what we've known before. So you shouldn't be expecting to find exact follow-ups of previous stories in the Batman verse.
Yeah, I guess like a lot of those background things are canon, and we've selected elements of each to build the web for our story and for the background for each one of our heroes and how it impacts different elements of Gotham.
Sorry.
Right. No, I was gonna say, how do you actually select what you want to keep and what you want to kind of like not keep? Because obviously it must be tricky knowing that if we have this element of it, people might be attached to this thread and they might not be able to create that distinct. It becomes harder to kind of tell yourself and that it's a different, unique story when you keep seeing elements of the original appear in or another story appear in your thing. So how do you strike that balance where it's like we're inspired by, we're not that thing?
I think we have the same creative challenge as a lot of the people who work with this amazing, deep DC IP around Gotham City. And it sounds challenging. It was really fun for us. We kind of focused on what were the touchstones we wanted for each hero to make them really different from each other, both for gameplay inspiration reasons and also for like how they interact with each other in the story and what their personal growth moments were going to be throughout the story. And I think we've done a fun job of it. So you'll see elements that spark familiarity, and as you play, you will also see some moments that maybe players have never experienced before, even if they're really hardcore DC fans.
Yeah, and I think it all boils down to, at some point for the narrative team, it was what is coherent when you're looking at each of the four, but also their story together, plus the overarching story of the game. And I think they did an actually awesome job.
Yeah, I'd love to dig a bit deeper on that kind of the story element of it. Can you talk a bit about how that unfolds? You obviously have a main story that you're telling, but then each individual character presumably has their own arc that they go on. Do they have like individual arcs for themselves, and then also like a shared arc with other characters who, depending on who you pair them with? How do you kind of take these narrative threads and weave them together, and what is the objective with that? It must be like super complicated.
It's really a matrix of possibility for the players. The complexity ends up happening when players put it all together themselves. Creatively, it wasn't that complex for us because we wanted you choose which hero you go through the story with. You can switch if you decide you want to play with somebody else. But generally speaking, you're experiencing it through the storyline of whoever you're playing in the game. And there are moments that are unique to your hero, sort of like impacting the character's emotional journey, I would say, through the game. But when you go on to a main story beat, there are slight differences in the storytelling of like who says what, but everybody goes on the same adventure and everybody overcomes the same challenges in the game. And that's where it really kind of ties everything back to a single path, which allows us to provide a really solid experience for the story that we wanted to tell.
And you might have seen me laughing when Geoff was saying creatively it wasn't a challenge. I was laughing just because I was thinking about Wilson, our
cinematics director would have me in a headlock.
Yes, like, exactly. Because at first, like, as Geoff was saying, although all of them are going on the same adventure, whether you are, especially when you're interacting with certain known characters of the world, depending on who you're playing, they have pretty different conversations. So for our cinematics team, it meant creating literally 4 versions of each of the cinematics. So that was a bit of a challenge. And
the heroes are not the same size. I'm sorry, Wilson, I shouldn't have said it was you.
Yeah.
I'm interested in what does that mean for like narrative beats? Because in my mind, I'm like, presumably there's going to be a point where, I don't know, Red Hood is not getting on with Grayson and they don't want to be near each other. How does the game deal with 2 players controlling them being like, no, I want to play as Red Hood and I'm going to play as Nightwing because they're who I main? But is there ever a moment where it's like, how do you approach an idea where it's like, we need these 2 to not be near each other, but players are going to want to play them and put them together? So how do you approach something like that?
So we try to create not situations like that, first of all.
Okay.
But yes, they do have different kinds of relationship depending on who is with whom, but it's never coming to a point where we would have to tell the player, no, you can't play in co-op with Red Hood today because no, you're mad at him.
Yeah, we always want to allow our players to act out and to play the game the way they want to play. That's always been a pillar of the project for us. So even though there are beats in the story where there's some angry tension between individuals in the story, when you take the controls and you play with a friend, you can either act out that angry tension or not.
All right. Obviously, like for me, like one of the most, I think like for a lot of fans of superhero teams, it's always like one of the most interesting moments is when there's that narrative beat where it's like, oh no, are they going to break up? So I guess you're not able to have that kind of tension in this, but you are coming at it bringing different kinds of tension in that. Can you talk a little bit about how you do explore the idea of tension when you have these individual characters that are so different but also need to be together always?
I don't want to give away too much of the story. I'll just say in a response to the question that our characters are always in Gotham. And the heroes don't always agree with their perspective on different characters in Gotham that they have to interact with. Some people will think that they should trust so-and-so, and some people are like, I'm not really into trusting so-and-so. It impacts the storytelling in that way.
Mm-hmm. Final question. I have to ask, what is the deal with Red Hood's double jump, which in a previous trailer was explained quite like very quickly as some sort of soul thing, like seeing Red Hood have supernatural abilities like a double jump? Yeah. What is the deal with that? How did you reconcile that narratively?
It is canon that Red Hood in some storylines is a very mystic figure, and one of the ways that we were excited about making him different from all of the other heroes in our game is that he's resurrected. He was dead. So he has a connection to certain spiritual forces in our game universe that the other heroes don't have. And so he expresses that through his abilities, not just in his traversal, but in some of his other abilities as well.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, Fleur, Geoff, thank you so much for your time. I'm excited to check out more of Gotham Knights. And for people watching, make sure to keep it on GameSpot for further Geoff Keighley coverage of Key 3. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.